All right, it's 12:31. Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us for this webinar about the NEH Fellowships Program. The webinar is designed to walk you through some of the highlights of the program and steps of the application process. My name is Claudia Kinkela. I'm a program officer in the Division of Research Programs. I'm the team lead for this program. And I'm joined here today by Madison Hindren and Jacob Lusk, who will help with questions both during the presentation and after. I'll be speaking for about 35 minutes and then spend the rest of our time answering your questions. Please feel free to submit questions at any point in the Q&A box. The webinar will be recorded and available on the Fellowships webpage, and you can see the link here in this slide. For closed captioning, click the CC in the lower right corner of your screen. And first things first, the guidelines, also known as the Notice of Funding Opportunity, are up on the web and applications can be submitted. The deadline is April 13, and let me remind you that this is a hard deadline and latecomers will not be admitted by the online system. Notifications will be made in December for projects starting as early as January 1st, 2023 or later. And the latest you could start a project if you applied this April would be September 1st, 2024. This is our agenda for the afternoon. I'll give you an overview of the fellowships program, discuss eligibility criteria, program details, review criteria, the contents of an application, and where to find more information. I'll give a brief overview of the review process, and as I talk, please feel free to type in questions. The major goal of the fellowships program is to support outstanding and advanced humanities research in all disciplines and fields. Your application will be stronger if you can clearly articulate your contribution both to your discipline and to the humanities in broader terms. Think about what questions and discussions your project will be able to contribute to and what it will add to those discussions. The program supports projects at any stage of development, that is early, middle, or late stages. Who should apply? The fellowships program is open to all disciplines in the humanities, but also to projects from the social sciences and the natural sciences that either apply humanities research methods or answer humanities questions and have interpretation as part of their research. We invite all disciplines, all individuals from all institutions, and especially welcome independent scholars and junior scholars. To give you an idea, here's a list with some of the humanities disciplines, but note that the list is not comprehensive. All disciplines are eligible to apply. And for those disciplines outside the purview of the humanities, the burden will be on you, the applicant, to demonstrate the humanities significance of your project, which the reviewer will then be able to evaluate. So all are welcome. We just need to hear about the humanities significance. Who's eligible to apply? All U.S. citizens are eligible and foreign nationals who have been living in the U.S. for the 3 years prior to the April 13 deadline. No advanced degree is required. No institutional affiliation is required. And while you don't have to have an advanced degree to apply, you cannot be enrolled in a degree program. That means graduate students are not eligible. However, for currently enrolled students, if you have satisfied all the requirements for a degree and are awaiting your conferral, You're eligible, but you must include a letter from the dean or the department chair attesting to your status as of the application deadline. What do people do and produce? The most common outcome of a fellowship is still a book or monograph, but we're seeing other types of products as well, including ebooks, digital materials, and peer-reviewed articles. Also, translations and editions with critical apparatus are fully eligible in this program. And here are some recent examples of fellowship awards. You see on the left, a book from 2021, Informing a Nation, Newspaper Presidency of Thomas Jefferson by Mel Laracy. In the middle, a book that was published in 2020, The Boston Massacre, A Family History by Serena Zabin. And on the right, from 2019, Viral Modernism, The Influenza Pandemic and Interwar Literature by Elizabeth Autka. So here's some of the key details of the program. An award can be requested for a length between 6 and 12 months. Your period of performance must be full-time and continuous. Again, the deadline is April 13. The minimum, the amount of the stipend is $5,000 per month for a maximum award of $60,000. Please start early and add a few extra days in your calendar for the submission process before the application deadline. So the notifications will go out in December. You can start as early as January 23 and as late as September 2024. That gives you a 20 months window to start your project and is also an encouragement for you to apply as early as possible. Our application numbers in this program range between 1,000 and 1,200 applications every year. We make an average of 79 awards per year for an average funding rate of 7%. It's a competitive program. Please don't let the numbers discourage you. The best thing you can do is to apply, to reapply, and then to apply again. If you do not get an award the first time, you will at least get valuable feedback from the reviewers you can ask for. Before we continue to the content of the application and to what your narrative should include, please take a look at the list of items and activities we do not fund. Among them are projects in creative nonfiction, advocacy work, policy papers, educational materials, empirical social science project without humanities content, textbook, curricula, dissertation revisions that have no new components. What do you need to apply? I'm going to go over the various items you will need and show you a list of the complete application materials a bit later. It will consist of a set of between 7 and 10 components that you will need to submit through grants.gov. You can find this information in the guidelines, the notice of funding opportunity, under D2, content and form of application submission, pages 5 through 13. Let's talk about the content of your application. First, you will need a 3-page narrative. This is the heart of your application, and I will talk more about the narrative on the next slides. This will be called your attachment 1. Second, and new this year, we request a separate page for the work plan. This is attachment 2. Again, I have a separate slide for that as well. Third, attachment 3 is a 1-page bibliography. It should demonstrate your knowledge of the field and can be used as a tool to show variety in literature. The reader will know that this list will not be comprehensive. Attachment 4 will be your 2-page resume. This also will be likely not be able to be comprehensive. I propose you focus on the items that are most relevant to your current project and best demonstrate your competencies there. Always add your language skills. And next, for certain types of projects, you will need a 1-page appendix. This is attachment 5. This includes editions, translations, database projects, visual materials, and all other projects do not need this appendix. Doctoral students who are just waiting for the conferral need to submit their letter from the dean or department under attachment 5 too. The 1,000-character summary of your proposal is important. It will be on the cover sheet of your application and will be what reviewers and staff see first. It also will help us determine what panel your application will be reviewed in, along with your pick of your project field in another forum I'll talk about. Lastly, you can submit 2 letters of reference. Ideally, they should come from 2 different institutions other than your own, and from people who know your project well. Missing letters of reference do not make your project ineligible, but I do recommend that you include them. Letters are due on May 4th, so not at the same time as your application. Recommenders will be getting a prompt from us 10 days after the deadline, around April 23rd, and will then have 2 weeks to send the letters in. And during that 2-week period, you will have the opportunity to check on the status of your letters, and you can send your recommenders a reminder. So the deadline for the recommenders is May 4th. Fellowships awards function like salary replacement, so there is no budget that is required. Again, I would like to highlight the importance of the format requirements. Unfortunately, there's no wiggle room for us with the format, as this is a semi-automated process. So I urge you to follow the instructions carefully. We on the program side do not have power over the format questions. All format violations will render your applications ineligible. Please do not exceed page limits and do not attach extra attachments. Make sure everything is complete, as incomplete applications will also not be considered. All right. We're back to the narrative section. On page 10 in the guidelines, you will find an explanation of the parts that should be in your narrative. And here are those 4. The first is a statement regarding the significance and contribution of your research. Second, organization or structure of your project should be discussed, as well as concepts and methods that you will employ. Third, your competency, skills, and access. Explain your background in the field, your language skills, your research materials, sources and archives, and other materials. And for the final product and dissemination, describe the intended results of your project, who your audience is, where you might want to publish, although note that no publisher contract is required to apply. And all of this information will have to be condensed in 3 pages. Please look at some of the samples online to see how to fit all this information in the right format. Please do not try to use small fonts to counter the page limit of 3 pages for the narrative, which would also be considered a format violation. New this year in this program is our request for a separate page for the work plan. Because as a federal agency, we need to pay special attention on how federal funds are spent, we added this request to our guidelines this year. So the work plan should include the current state of the project, describe in increments of 3 months or fewer, that what will be accomplished during the period of performance, where you will be, how you will spend your time. You do not need to finish the entire project during the fellowship period, but please discuss when the project might be finished. And finally, your work plan should not depend heavily on factors beyond your control, such as the receipt of outside reviewers' reports from a publisher. Also new this year is no requirement for a writing sample. Every year we review our guidelines, and this year we determined that we do not need a separate writing sample for the program. Consider the 3-page narrative, your writing sample, that will demonstrate the clarity of your writing and which the reviewers will then assess. How will your project be reviewed? So now we're coming to the review criteria. Before you start your application, your first step should be to take a look at these criteria, which we give to reviewers for evaluation. I also highly recommend that you use those criteria to structure and present your project in the narrative. And you'll find these criteria under E1 or page 15 of the funding notice. And I'll go through them one by one because they are most important. The first review criteria is the intellectual significance. Tell your reader what your project is about and why it is important. You should explain what it will contribute to your specific field in a way that a humanities generalist can understand. You should also situate your project in the broader context of humanities research and knowledge. The main objective here you want to ask yourself is, how will my project change scholarship? How will we think differently? Step back. Does it tell us anything larger? Press yourself to see the broader significance for the humanities. One way to stress your contribution is to describe how your work fits with other work in your field that has addressed the same subject. Second, peer reviewers find that a well-written, clear application is a predictor of the quality of the planned publication. So writing a good abstract and narrative is also important. Propose specific research questions and explain the methods, concepts, and approaches you will pursue to address them. The work plan is vital. Provide a detailed work plan in 3 or 6 months increments. Be realistic about how much work you can get done during the grant period. Be specific. I'm going to work on chapters 5, 6, 7, whichever applies. Say something like, I'll go to this archive or use that material. Think about where you are going to be when the award period starts. That will be 9 or more months from your application date. State where you are now and where you think you will be then. Fourth is this criterion that refers to your resume, the quality or promise of quality of the applicant. Emphasize your strengths, exceptional language abilities that the project requires, archival collection that will add, and so on here. The last review criterion is the likelihood that you will complete the project. This refers to your work plan, to your CV, and to the project description. Mention the expected publication and other outcomes of the project. Evaluators will look at your publication record and referee letters to decide whether they have confidence in your ability to finish the project. All right, that was about the content of your application. Now we will switch to the submission process via grants.gov. All applications have to go through this government portal. New this year is an added credential that was just added earlier this year. So please double check your grants.gov accounts. Starting next week, applicants will be required to log into grants.gov using login.gov credentials rather than the existing grants.gov logins and password. So you will need to create a login.gov account if you don't have one already, and link it to your grants.gov account. And all this information is available on the grants.gov website. It is also going to be on our program website, not yet, but hopefully very soon. This is the link in the slide that will be available in a few days as well. So how to apply via grants.gov. Your complete application consists of these 4 major components, with your application being one of the 4 components that also have these 4 to 7 attachments. So the first form, grants.gov form, is called the SF424 form. It has all the applicant information, your name, phone number, email address, and mailing address. The most important piece for us in this form is your email address. And for some reason, the field is not made mandatory, so make sure that you don't forget to add your email address. The zip code plus extension. If you don't know your extension, put in 4 zeros for extension. You need to add your congressional district, project information, and project title. And this is also where your project description of the 1,000 characters will be, as well as start and ending dates of your project. The second form is the NEH Supplemental Information Form. This is the form where you will have the opportunity to pick the project field. There's a choice of 3 project fields that you can pick from. The first one should be the most important project field if you have more than one, and this is the indication we will use also to place your project on a certain review panel. Your field of study is asked here, your institutional affiliation with address, your status as junior or senior scholar. We define junior scholars as those who are 7 years or fewer beyond their terminal degree. Also on this form are the reference letter names, email addresses, and affiliations you have to put in. And again, important here to note for the referees, we can accept only 1 email address per person without getting an error message. The third form, a project performance site location form, is a very quick form that asks where the project activity takes place during the award period. If you stay local, put in your home state or city. If you travel to archives, add those as well. And number 4 is what's here simply called attachment, is in fact your application. And the next slide shows you the overview of all the components that you will need to apply. So you see here the first 4. These are the 4 that I just went through. And number 4, attachment, that's the content of your application. So again, grants.gov, the first thing you want to do, you can start today if you'd like, is to register if you have not registered with grants.gov. Check out the cross-reference to the new link. All federal applications have to go through this portal. One specialty to the fellowships program is that we are an individual or a grant for individuals. So most government grants are institutional grants. So you need to be careful that when you create an account, it has to be an individual account. Make sure that your password is active, has to be updated every few months, and do that early to allow for technical problems. Over 50% of our applicants or applications are submitted on the last day. I recommend you submit at least a week before or more to avoid any of these technical issues. If you realize once you submitted your application, you realize you made a mistake somewhere and want to resubmit your application before the application deadline, you can just submit it again or resubmit it, and we will use your last validated online submission. If you have technical problems, please call the grants.gov helpline. It's a 24/7 helpline, and you can find the number here or also in our guidelines. Here are some of the resources for you to use. The first is the guide, we call the guide notice of funding opportunity. It has all the information for applying. Everything that I explain here is in some form in this notice. Also on our program web page are sample application narratives. If you scroll down on the left-hand side, you'll find for fellowships, I think, over 18 samples that I recommend you take a look at some. And thirdly, you can also access a list of recently funded projects on our main website. If you scroll all the way to the bottom, there's a link that says search all past awards that you can use to familiarize yourself what kinds of projects we funded in your area. You can also write us an email if you have questions. Here's our email address, fellowships@neh.gov, and the link to our website. Finally, one more piece of strategy to think about is the timeline of your application from submission to notification. The federal grant process is long, about 8 months in the case of fellowships. So again, where will you be in your project 6 months from now? Submission is April 13 this year. Our review panels, peer review panels meet between June and August. We have the National Council on the Humanities that meets 3 times a year. They will review the recommendations in November, and the chair of the endowment makes the final decisions shortly after notifications are sent out in early December. Keep these steps and the timeline in mind as you plan and prepare your application. Write your application with various audiences in mind, from the peer review to NEH staff and general readers. And finally, I have a list of frequently asked questions I'd like to go through quickly. Are dissertation revisions eligible? I already spoke a little bit about that. Projects based on dissertations need to demonstrate how the project moves beyond the original dissertation. So yes, if there are new components here. Can I apply with a collaborative project? If you're working on a collaborative project, each collaborator must submit an individual application. This program is designed for individuals, but if you have two people, for example, working on a book, then each of the two would submit a separate application explaining their part, the other part, and what is new in their research. Third, can I apply to other NEH grant programs concurrently? Yes, you can apply to most other NEH grant programs concurrently, including Public Scholars Program, Summer Stipends Program, but you can only apply to one in some cases. You cannot, and that includes if you apply to fellowships, you cannot apply to awards for faculty, you cannot apply to NEH Mellon Fellowships for digital publications, or for fellowships for advanced research on Japan. And there's a full list that explains the concurrent applications also in the Notice of Funding Opportunity. Should I apply to NEH fellowships or NEH Mellon Fellowships for digital publication? That is your choice. You can apply to either or. Fellowships program is open to digital publications as well. The difference between Mellon and the fellowships program is that the Mellon initiative is particularly for projects that require digital expression and digital publication. Those that are born digital, they're separated out. They have a larger technical apparatus. So that's an individual decision, and I would recommend you contact us if you have questions about that. Lastly, does my university or college submit the application for me? Because this is a individual application. The answer is no. It's important that you submit from your own computer because all notifications will go to the email provided in the application. And that is the end of the presentation. If you have questions, please type them in the Q&A box. Thank you for listening, and we will be looking forward to your applications on April 13. All right. Do we have questions?
We do. I will read the first one. We've already covered that. What do you mean by junior scholars? Is there no age requirements? Do you want me to go ahead and take that, Claudia?
Sure.
Yeah, for the purposes of NEH, junior scholars are defined as someone who has received their terminal degree within the last 7 years. A senior scholar is someone who has who received their terminal degree more than 7 years ago. So it's just a simple chronological determination.
Thank you, Madison.
Yes, I will. This is Jacob speaking. I will take the next question. And before I do, I just want to mention to everyone listening that we've actually got quite a lot of questions that we're still trying to get to. We've got over 100 in the queue right now. So I don't think we're going to be able to answer quite everyone's, but we'll do our best. And if we don't answer your question during this webinar, feel free to email us at fellowships@neh.gov. And we'll be happy to get back to you as soon as we can. The next question is, are U.S. citizens living abroad eligible to apply? The answer is yes. If you're a U.S. citizen, you are eligible to apply no matter where you live or work. And again, if you are not a U.S. citizen, the NEH requirement is that you must have lived in the United States for the past 3 years as of the application deadline. We don't collect information in the application about permanent residence status or green card status or visa information. We will ask you to self-certify that you've been living in the US for 3 years.
Thank you.
Our next question is about whether there's a nomination process. Do we need to be nominated by our universities, or can we apply for the fellowship directly? For the fellowships program, you can apply directly. Our summer stipends program does require institutional nomination for some applicants, but that is not the case for the fellowships program.
Correct.
Next question, does holding the award full-time mean that you cannot be working or teaching? So the fellowships program does require that you work full-time on your funded project for the duration of the award period, however long that is, 6 months to 12 months. And so yes, the expectation of NEH is that if you are on your fellowship award period, you are stepping away from your teaching and administrative responsibilities. Claudia, did you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I'll need to say that this is one of our most important stipulations in the fellowships program, which is designed to buy you time away from teaching and other administrative duties. So yes, absolutely, that's a full-time requirement.
Yeah, and I haven't published another question, but I think we've gotten some questions about, how you make this work, and it's different really for everyone. Some applicants take a sabbatical and use the award on top of the sabbatical. Some recipients get course releases, and some institutions provide top-off salary. It's really up to you to work out with your institution how the financial aspect works out in terms of making up the difference of your salary or arranging for leave. But you do have to step away fully from your duties.
And one more addition to that is that if you are able to receive other funding on top of NEH funding, we also allow for that. So if you were to get other grant agencies for the same project in the same time, we can add those to the NEH fellowship as well. We don't get involved in any of the negotiations, as Jacob said, but that's how most people will make it work, either with sabbaticals or additional funding.
All right, the next question is, does an applicant increase their chances of getting an NEH if they apply for a shorter period of time, for example, 6 months as opposed to 12? The answer here is no. Each application is evaluated based on the request and the work plan submitted in the application. You want your work plan to demonstrate that you have enough time to fill the requested time period. At the same time, you don't want to be overly ambitious, but having a shorter period of a shorter request in and of itself does not make your application more or less competitive.
In fact, well, 1 second, I'm just thinking, if you have the time of 12 months, so 12 months is the maximum amount, I would recommend you apply for 12 months. You can cut back once you receive the award and you say, oh, I only have 9 months, you can cut back. But if you apply for 9 months, you cannot go up and receive an award, you cannot go up to 12 months. So the amount of time you apply for does not factor into the evaluation itself.
The next question is, Is there a deadline by which you need to complete your project? And the answer is no. As Claudia mentioned in the presentation, we are able to fund projects at any stage of development. So if you're applying for a project to, write the final 3 chapters of your monograph, then certainly you might finish the project during the whole project during your NEH award period. But if you apply for a project to conduct preliminary research or some sort of research before even getting to the writing stage, then it might be years before you finish your project. So the answer is no, and we remind panelists that you don't have to complete the entire project during the award period. We're looking for you to explain what piece of the project you're specifically going to be working on during the award period, and be sure to also, even if it's very early stage, talk a little bit about the dissemination plans that you have for the project in the long term or the short term.
Thank you.
All right, next question is, if you ask for 12 months of funding and you are awarded funding, will you necessarily get 12 months of funding? So as Claudia said, yes, we will not reduce an award, an offer for, we will not reduce award requests. However, if you have asked for 12 months and you need to reduce your award, we can do that if you're offered an award.
Does it help to strengthen your application to say that you have an advanced contract agreement with a press? So it's important to note that contracts are not required. You don't have to have a contract in hand at the time of application, and certainly if you're earlier in your project at sort of the research stage, then you may not be anywhere near that part of your project yet. Certainly, though, sometimes we, see panelists leave comments that that they, when they're evaluating the dissemination plans for a project, that for later stage writing projects, that having a contract gives them some assurance that the project will be completed as proposed. Did you have anything to add to that, Claudia?
No, I think that's perfect. Yeah, I think back to what Madison was saying. So whatever you request in terms of time, we will honor. You are the one to then decide if you're awarded, if you want to go lower than the months, but we cannot go higher.
Thank you. All right, the next question, would the amount of individual funding be at the discretion of the NEH, or should the applicant submit a budget with a proposal? In the case of a project for the completion of a book manuscript during 12 months, would the max funding be approved? So for this program, we don't require budgets, and the award amount is calculated based on the time that you're requesting at a rate of $5,000 per month, and that would be the maximum. So if and that would be the award amount. It's a flat rate. If you requested 8 months of funding, your award amount would be $40,000. If you requested 12 months, the award amount would be $60,000.
Yeah, so these are simply salary replacements. So no budget is needed, and there's also no additional, I understand the question comes from people who apply sometimes for institutional grants where you have the budget and you have all these additional costs that you can submit for. Here it's simply flat out salary replacement, no overhead costs, nothing else. So this is the flat rate that Madison mentioned.
The next question is, does the bibliography need to be in a certain style like Chicago or APA? And the answer is no. This is up to you. Please, format your bibliography in the way that you think reflects your work. And similarly to any citations in your narrative or elsewhere in your project.
Next question, do letters of reference need to address this particular project, or can they attest to the quality of your work and your character more broadly? The most effective letters will speak to the project for which you're requesting funding, its significance, and also your background qualifications to bring it to fruition. They could also speak to how the current project, put that in the context of any previous work you've done. There aren't strict requirements for those letters, but the ones that tend to be the most effective do address the current project. We recommend sharing your application materials with your letter writers so that they can best speak to the project and expand on what you have in the narrative. We've gotten several questions, I haven't published all of them, about who the best letter writers are. And in general, you want to select people who know you, know your work, and know the project and can speak to it in their letters.
And going off that, we have another question about whether letter writers should be at different institutions than the applicant. You know, you should choose referees who, as Madison said, will really engage with your project and the significance, and will speak to the review criteria. But yeah, you know, it should be noted that I think panelists do tend to see more value in letters from different institutional contexts, people who don't, who might have a little more objectivity in terms of evaluating your project and don't have personal stakes in it. For junior scholars, of course, this can sometimes be a little bit more challenging. You might prefer to go with a former advisor, someone who knows your work very well. So it really just depends on your personal preferences and who you think can write the best letter for you.
I'm going to add here that for our junior scholars who use their advisors as referees, that after a certain amount of years past the degree, I would advise against it, just simply because reviewers won't look at it favorably. So once you're out for, let's say, 2, 3, 4, 5 years, I would go with a different recommender than your advisor.
All right, next question. Will this PowerPoint be made available on the NEH website? Yes. If you go to the fellowships page in a few days, you will see the PowerPoint and a recording of this presentation on the website.
Correct. Give me a few days to get this up there. You will have it.
We have another question. We have a question that is about supplementary information. I think the question is really about adding more information to your application package after the deadline, and might also include providing more attachments than what we're asking for in the directions. So please don't provide anything in your application submission that we're not asking for. You know, we don't need a letter from a press. That's not required, and in fact, it could jeopardize your application status if our Office of Grant Management determines it to be non-responsive. So please only provide the attachments that we ask for in the instructions. And then in terms of any new information after the deadline, this information just won't be, we're not able to add information to your application package after the deadline. All applications will move forward as they were submitted by the deadline until final decisions are made.
Well, I'll take a moment to hammer that out again. The format it's very rigid, and I hope that you will forgive us that we do that, but the 3-page narrative is a limit, 1-page bibliography is a limit, 2 pages CV is a limit, and only appendices as they are necessary for databases or visual materials. Only one, in translations, 1 page per item. So it's very small. It's a small narrative, a small application package, but it's very compressed and dense. And I hope that you will be able to do that for us. Thanks.
Okay. I have published some additional questions. In editing of CV down to 2 pages, beyond the suggestions you mentioned, is there any information that must be included? I would definitely recommend anything that is related to the project you include. So talks, previous publications related, you want to include your current position and information about your education. Other than that, we don't have strict requirements as to what's included on that resume. But again, anything related to the project, I would recommend including on your edited CV.
Yeah, I would say just standard procedure for CVs. So education, past institutions, honors, awards, publications, languages I would put on the CV. And I think that's about it.
Thanks. We haven't published a question on this yet, but I just wanted to quickly acknowledge we've gotten several questions about humanistic research methods, and a few folks who are social scientists have written in to ask about their chances. So really quickly, when we say humanistic research methods, we're referring to those methods that are common in humanities disciplines. Literary analysis, archival research, ethnographic research, are just a few, philosophical inquiry. So that's what we mean by that. And if you're a social scientist or someone working in a field that isn't normally considered a humanities discipline, you're certainly still eligible to apply. But as Claudia mentioned in the presentation, you're really going to want to make an argument, a very clear and very direct argument for the significance of your research and your overall project to humanities scholarship. And anything I'm missing there, Madison or Claudia?
Yeah, this question comes to us a lot regarding humanities, and it's a really good question because so our definition of humanities is very broad. We always say it's very inclusive, and I come from a discipline that's borderline also between humanities and social science. I'm a political scientist by training, so we have some parts that are social science, some that are humanities. And so I look at my political scientists, my sociologists, my psychologists, anthropologists. There's all these borderline disciplines that straddle both ways. And all we ask that you, in your application, you sort of highlight those humanities contributions you're going to make. It might be questions, it might be methods, it might be the way you go about it. Anything that has a history in front of it is automatically considered humanities. If you write a history of cancer, you're already in the middle of our purview. Historical questions are considered humanities. And so whichever discipline you come from, we ask you that you bring in that moment that you think will make the contribution to the humanities. And sometimes it's hard to figure that out if you are in a discipline, but then I would recommend that you get in touch with us or ask your sponsored research office if they can help. They also have very good resources for that. But again, we're wide open to that definition of the humanities.
All right, next question is, if the product is in another language that is not English, will it hurt the chance to get funding? Not necessarily, but you do want to justify that decision and why that's the best dissemination plan for your project. Panelists will want to know that it won't hinder your project reaching the broadest audience possible. I don't know, Claudia, if you would like to add on to that.
Yeah, if it's to be published in a different language, we have supported projects, for example, written in Spanish. Then you would, again, demonstrate in the application why this is needed in Spanish. And, you know, this is significant for the Spanish-speaking world, and you give your reasons for it. So I would just, again, highlight it, and so that the reviewer understands why you write it in Spanish rather than English. That's it.
So our next question is, can you propose to conduct your work out of the country for a portion or the entirety of the grant period? And yeah, you can, especially if you're doing any sort of field work, but also if you're just living or staying abroad and planning to work on your writing, that's fine. There's no eligibility requirement that you must be in the United States during the term of your award period.
Yeah, in fact, I think that's the beauty of the fellowships program. It's a non-residential program. It allows you to go wherever you can do the work. There's no restrictions in terms of place. And in fact, a lot of the projects are, if you have archival work, they're done in other places. So yes. Thanks, Jacob.
Next question, can the work plan be bullet points or a chart, or should it be in prose? As long as it fits onto that, within that one page page limit, it can be either in prose or bullet points or a chart or a combination of those. Like I said, as long as you're using the right a font no smaller than 11 1-point margins and can get it on one page, we can take it. You want it to convey, though, you want it to make sense and be logical and easy for panelists to understand what you'll be doing during the award period.
Yeah, we see both versions, so bullet points or narratives. Both are acceptable. Yeah, I think that's right, Madison.
So we've still got, I think that's all the ones we've published so far. We've still got about 180 people on the webinar, and we've got over 170 questions that have come in that we still haven't gotten to. So, you know, I just want to say again that we're not going to be able to get to everyone's question. And certainly if you have a question that's very specific to your project or your circumstances, please feel free to write to us at fellowships@neh.gov so that we can help you. I'm just going through a few and trying to find some that might be more broadly applicable to everyone. And we've got a few questions about formatting concerns. Rule of thumb, you should use no smaller than 11-point font. There's no requirement to use any particular font, but obviously it's a good idea to use one that's legible. So we usually see Times New Roman or Arial or something pretty common. One-page margins and single spacing is fine and accepted. I have a few people who asked if they need to double space their narrative, and no, you shouldn't do that because then you're going to lose out on a lot of space. And then beyond that, remember that you need to submit your application files as PDFs. You should be able to save anything that you write in Microsoft Word or whatever your publishing platform is. You should be able to save it as a PDF pretty easily. If you submit it as any other document type, the system will reject it, and you'll get an error message saying that your application wasn't received. So do make sure that you save them in PDF and make sure that they're not encrypted, because that will cause issues as well. We have another question about the work plan and sort of breaking down the project and the work plan. This question asks, should we specify which parts of the book we will be writing and at what time? Claudia, do you want to take that? Take a little bit more.
Yeah. The work plan should be as specific as possible. So I would probably say you want to include where the project is at the moment before the, let's say, before your fellowship period begins. If say you have written two chapters already, you can say, I have written 2 chapters. From today until the end of the year, I will do another chapter or 2. And then during the time of the fellowship, starting, let's say, January 1st through December 31st in 2023, I will do X. I will, go to 5 archives. I will write 5 chapters. And here's the breakdown of sort of January through March, April through June. Whatever makes sense. If you write a chapter every 2 months or every 3 months or every 4 months, I would write it down. I would break it down in small logical pieces and explain the 12 months that way. And then you say, well, at the end of the fellowship period, I will have finished 3/4 of my book, and I will finish the last quarter after the fellowships period, hoping to send it to the publisher in 24, something like that.
We have a few questions that have spoken to our various funding restrictions in the fellowships program. So I thought maybe I could touch on those really quickly. Some folks have asked about the restriction on advocacy, and this confuses a lot of people. So I think the easiest way for us to explain this is when we say advocacy, we mean if you're really engaging with a program, a program of social policy or endorsing political candidates or legislation, going beyond normal scholarship, which might often be about topics that are politicized in some way, but going beyond that to really recommend some sort of program of social political change. That's a line that we as a federal agency can't cross. We can't support projects that engage in that kind of advocacy. We also can't support projects that advance a particular ideological or religious point of view. We got a few questions about that. Obviously, we receive projects every year in religious studies. That's not what we mean by this. It's perfectly fine to be proposing projects on ideologies, religious systems, but we're not able to fund anything that's actually sort of trying to advance that in non-objective ways. And then finally, I wanted to hit on one thing that we see a few times every year, which is creative nonfiction. That is not an eligible project type. You'll see in the funding restrictions in the notice of funding opportunity. A lot of authors are turning to critical nonfiction to sort of create more compelling stories, written materials, but that's not something that we're able to fund in this program. We're looking for scholarship that sticks to factual information and doesn't take creative license with historical actors or situations.
Thanks, Jacob. I will add to that regarding political activism or policy recommendations. I think the critical words for us here are scholarly and balanced. So you are welcome to write on any subject, political or not political, as long as there is scholarly distance and balanced treatment of it. I think that's where, as a federal funder, we'll be looking at that. For example, I guess if you wanted to write on fascism, the phenomenon of fascism, it's a political movement. You would write about it in a way that we can see, there's a critical distance to it, and that you are not endorsing something like fascism, or this is just an example of any ideological movement, but you write about it from a scholarly perspective and include a number of comments and perspectives on that subject. Maybe that helps.
We've gotten a couple questions about the process for referees to submit their letters, whether we can get letters through Interfolio, things like that. So I'm going to talk about that real quick. When you submit your application, at that point, you're providing us with the contact information for your referees. After the application deadline, we will send prompts to your referees and instruct them on how to get their letter to us directly. We won't go through Interfolio or anything like that. So just wanted to clarify that, because we did get a couple questions about that process.
Done a few questions about the bibliography, again, about what sorts of text to select for the bibliography. It's important to remember that, as with the resume, a one-page bibliography is quite short. We don't expect you to provide a comprehensive list of sources that are important to your project. What we're looking for is for you to provide sort of a representative sample of the literature that you think is, most informs your project, whether it be your concerning your subject matter or your methods or the theoretical framework. Sometimes applicants do use a bit of the bibliography to specify some of their primary source collections that they'll be working with. For instance, archival collections that they'll be planning to look at. And then sometimes applicants just provide secondary literature and sort of use the narrative to talk about some of the primary sources that they'll be considering. So there's a lot of different ways that you can do that. But don't feel pressured to include everything, because that's not our expectation. And similarly with your resume, it's only 2 pages, so certainly many people have to cut quite a lot of information that they would normally submit in a resume. We advise you to just sort of choose the pieces of information that are most relevant to the application and to your project in all these cases.
We've also gotten several questions about the difference between the fellowships program and the NEH Awards for Faculty program. There are some differences. One is that the Awards for Faculty program is only open to individuals affiliated with either historically Black colleges and universities, Hispanic serving institutions, or tribal colleges and universities. Furthermore, the Awards for Faculty program is tailored to people at those institutional types. It allows for some more flexibility in terms of the award period. It can be as short as 2 months, up to 12 months. The Awards for Faculty program does also allow for part-time, meaning at least half-time work. But the biggest difference is that anyone can apply to the fellowships program. You don't need to be at one of those specially designated institutional types.
Yeah, maybe some of you remember that it used to be possible to apply to both programs. up to a few years ago, but not any longer. So you have to decide which program you apply to if you're at an institution of either Hispanic serving, historically Black, or tribal colleges. You can choose. If you're not, you apply automatically to fellowships. Thanks, Madison.
We have a couple questions about how the award funds are actually paid out. And so again, this is an individual award. You will be applying with your own grants.gov account. You're welcome to use whatever resources are available to you at your institution, but and you know, get any help that you need from your sponsored research office, for example. But you'll be the sole applicant, and if you receive an award, the funds are yours, not your institution's. So you can choose when you accept the award to either receive the funds directly into your personal checking account, or you can arrange for the funds to be routed through your institution first. And many people do choose that latter option because they find it helpful to do that so that institutions can withhold funds for fringe benefits, etc. The funds are paid out in stipends that usually amount to 3 or 4 months of funding. So you wouldn't be receiving $5,000 every month. It's usually set up as 4 payments of $15,000 for a year-long award. We've gotten a few questions as well about how these funds are taxed, and it's important to note that NEH staff are not allowed to provide any tax guidance on these funds. We can tell you that you will receive the stipends in the amount of $5,000 per month of your award. They are not pre-taxed, and you'll have to speak with your tax professional to figure out how to report those earnings.
Thank you.
We have one question that I want to get to real quick. Do the online samples include all the components listed or only the 3-page narrative? Any samples that we have online will only include the narrative portion and the bibliography. And do keep in mind they were submitted in previous deadlines, and the formatting requirements may have changed since those applications were submitted. So when looking at those samples, be sure, just note things might have changed, and be sure when crafting your application to make sure it conforms to the current notice of funding opportunity and the requirements laid out there.
Thanks, Madison. Yeah, I apologize. So the work plan is new this year, so there will be unfortunately, we don't have a sample online yet that includes a separate page for the work sample. I had that question earlier, and I looked around in other programs if there was a sample. I did not find one that's currently online, so I hope that our explanations today will suffice and make you comfortable that you can just, and it doesn't even have to be the full page. We've seen work samples that are just work plans that are just half a page long. Some are very short, some are very long, all the whole page. It depends on how much material you want to include, but know that it's an opportunity for you to, again, talk about your project in a little bit more detail, which you should, I think, take. It's an extra page. You can convey how great your project is, and yeah, that's a good thing.
We have a question about the special initiatives, a more perfect union, and how that factors into the review and selection process. So what those special initiatives are additional funding and are meant to encourage applications in those areas. However, they applications that fit those special areas of interest, that determination is made after they've gone through review. If we can use those funds to fund an application, that's made at that time, but other applications across different topics or fields are not disadvantaged in the process. I don't know if I explained that very well, so if Claudia or Jacob want to chime in to make that a little clearer, feel free.
Yeah, I'll say quickly, do not pay attention to the special initiative in your proposal too much. If at all, you will not get extra points for it. Let's put it this way. There is no process that allows us to consider this extra. It's an initiative. It's not a program. We encourage applications in that area, but you will not be earning extra points for it. So that's the long and short of it, I think.
We have a question as to whether you can include hyperlinks in your application materials to, for example, maybe your personal website or something like that. You can, there's no rule against it, but panelists are only required to read the application materials that we've requested from applicants. They're not required to navigate to any hyperlinked web materials that you want to provide, but they might. It's up to them.
Yeah, that's an interesting, I think, area that we will probably explore in the future with all the online references. We haven't gotten there yet, so we rely on the material, the application package that you send us, and yeah, including links or not links, but I would not rely on a link to explain important pieces of information that you want to convey. All right, we have a few more minutes. How are we doing with the questions, the list?
I'm reading through now to see what else we can address.
Yeah. So in the meantime, what Jacob, I think that was really helpful to know for people that they can send us an email if they have more questions. I'm excited to hear that there's so many questions and so many people chiming in or listening in today. Hopefully this was started helpful and take away some of the anxiety about this application process that I know takes some time. So feel free to get in touch with us if we can't cover everything today. You know where to find us. I'll put the slide in one more time in a minute with our names. Yeah, take your time. That's all it is, really, preparation time, including the submission process. That's something that people will not think of when they're so involved in the content of the application writing, and then all of a sudden you have to pay attention to these format requirements and details. So I encourage you to take extra days for just the technical questions and to go through those format requirements. Thank you.
Yeah, and on that note, I just want to remind everyone that grants.gov is the federal website, is the website that is used by I think all or most federal grant-making agencies. They are their own entity, and NEH staff do not have administrative access to grants.gov. So if you're having any technical issues with grants.gov or you have questions about the platform, they have a 24/7 help support staff. And they will be able to get back to you both more quickly and with an answer that we as NEH staff may not be able to provide. Wish we could always help folks with that, but sometimes we simply can't provide any assistance, and you have to get in touch with them. I think that the questions coming in have really slowed down. There are a few that we, as I said, haven't gotten to, but that are really sort of very specific and might be better answered via email. I think that we are in good shape.
That's wonderful. Thank you. Thank you both, Jacob and Madison, for answering and fielding questions. Thank you to all of you still listening. I'm going to wrap it up here just now. I promised the link one more time. Let's see if I can get that up for the last minute. And with that, I expect your applications in April, and thank you very much for joining us today.